The smell of boiling water poured over a heel of bread is not a smell most British kitchens have known for 30 years. 1947. Barnsley, South Yorkshire. A woman in a back-to-back terrace tore the end from a brown loaf, laid it in a shallow enamel bowl, poured water from the kettle over it, shook in coarse salt and covered it with a saucer. Supper in under 3 minutes. Number 25 is where it begins. Number 25. The bread and dripping bowl, County Durham, 1941. In a pit village where beef dripping was collected in an enamel basin after the Sunday joint and kept in the cold larder all week, a miner's wife scraped the set white fat onto a heel of brown bread, poured boiling water over it, added salt and ate standing at the range. 2 minutes. The fat dissolved into a thin, savoury broth. The bread held. The body was fed with fat and carbohydrate in the simplest possible form. Ministry of Food pamphlets on fat rationing described dripping as a household asset, not a luxury, a resource. For seniors, the meal required no chewing force, no preparation beyond a kettle, and delivered dense calories at almost no cost per serving. The larder kept the dripping cold and firm all week. When the larder went, the basin went with it. The habit followed. Number 24. Porridge with salt and dripping. Glasgow, 1943. A housewife in a tenement with one iron pot on a gas ring measured 2 ounces of rolled oats from the week's ration, boiled them in salted water for 3 minutes, and stirred in a small scrape of dripping at the end. No milk, no sugar. The dripping gave it body. The oats gave it slow heat. Scottish Women's Rural Institute circulated guidance on precisely this method during the rationing years, treating porridge not as a breakfast luxury but as a fuel mechanism. Before oat milk, before overnight oats, before any of the reinventions. This was the original 5-minute sustaining meal, built for a body that needed to work or to stay warm or simply to endure the morning. Number 23. Pea soup from dried split peas, Leeds, 1944. An allotment keeper soaked a handful of dried yellow split peas in an earthenware bowl overnight. The next morning, those softened peas boiled through in under 5 minutes. A stock cube dissolved, 1 leek, sliced thin so it cooked fast, stirred in at the end. A Ministry of Food leaflet titled Vegetables Without Waste recommended this exact method. The overnight soak was the trick, the mechanism that collapsed a 40-minute recipe into 5. High protein, soft enough for any throat. The bowl of yellow soup cost a few pence. The 5 minutes was earned the night before. That was the old woman's secret. Number 22, Stotty cake with scrape, Newcastle upon Tyne, 1946. Day-old stotty bread, dense, flat, cheaper than fresh loaves, was bought from northeast bakeries at reduced prices from late morning onward. A thick slice was cut, a thin scrape of margarine applied, and a small amount of fish paste or marmite spread over the surface. 90 seconds. The stotty's density meant it was slow to digest, which was the point. Suited to the reduced appetite of older bodies, it held without heaviness. It was designed to last until the next day. Baker's price records from this period show the day-old stotty trading at a fraction of the standard loaf. That economy was understood by every woman on the street who walked to the bakery after midday. Number 25 to number 22 mark the founding era. Meals born not from choice but from arithmetic, from rationing books and shilling budgets and the domestic science of making what existed into what was needed. Here is the first twist. These meals were not primitive, they were precise. They encoded caloric logic, protein management, and waste elimination into actions so simple that no recipe was required. But when abundance arrived in the late 1950s and 1960s, when sugar came off ration in 1953, when supermarkets began appearing on British high streets, when the message from television and advertising was that the future meant more, the precision was read as poverty. The meals were not adapted, they were discarded, and that discarding is still costing money today. Number 21, boiled egg on toast soldiers, Birmingham, 1947. Marguerite Patten, contributing to BBC Home Service broadcasts during the rationing years, described the single-boiled egg as a complete protein meal for one. Not a supplement, not a side, a meal. 1 egg, 4 minutes in boiling water. Toast cut into soldiers, salt. A complete amino acid profile in a vessel small enough for one hand. The egg was rationed at 1 per person per week at the peak of scarcity in the early 1940s, which meant this meal was planned for, waited for, and used with 0 waste. The soft yolk required no force to swallow. The soldiers required minimal effort to lift. For older bodies with reduced appetite, this was calibrated eating. Not abundance, not deprivation, but precision. Number 20. Cheese on toast, Welsh rabbit stripped. Cardiff, 1948. A domestic science teacher in a Welsh secondary school, her class recorded in the Board of Education's wartime curriculum logs, taught the stripped version. 1 ounce of grated cheddar laid directly onto thick white bread, a thin scrape of mustard applied beneath, placed under a grill for 3 minutes. Welsh rabbit had always been the working-class answer to meat scarcity. The stripped version removed the ale, the egg, and the elaboration. What remained was calcium on bread in 4 minutes. For seniors, the grill required no stirring, no watching, no timing precision beyond until it bubbles. The mustard acted as a flavor anchor. Welsh rabbit was a name that made poverty sound like a feast. That was always the point. Number 19. Condensed milk sandwich, rural Somerset, 1949. A village grocer's account book from a Somerset community records sweetened condensed milk as one of the most consistent weekly purchases among elderly single women in the post-war years. The tin was cheap. It required no refrigeration once opened if kept cool. 2 slices of white bread. The condensed milk spooned directly from the tin. No butter needed. The milk provided its own fat. 60 seconds, high caloric density. The sweetness acted as an appetite trigger for elderly bodies where appetite had reduced. Grocery rationing on most items ended in stages through the early 1950s, but the condensed milk sandwich predated and outlasted rationing because it required nothing from any ration book. It sounds like a child's treat. It was a widow's supper. Number 18. Bread pudding, cold set version, Manchester, 1950. A Women's Institute branch record describes the no-bake bread pudding as a standard household practice for managing stale bread. The bread soaked overnight in cold milk with sugar and dried currants, pressed into a tin and weighted sliced cold the next morning. 2 minutes of assembly each day. The oven never had to be lit. That was the whole point. In households where fuel cost money and a single gas ring was more economical than a full oven, cold setting was not a compromise. It was the method. The result was dense, sweet, soft, and kept well in a cool larder for several days. 1 portion slice, no cooking on the day of eating. When ovens became standard and fuel ceased to be a budget calculation, the method was forgotten because its logic had vanished with its context. Number 17. Oxtail broth with barley, Barrow in Furness, 1952. Nella Last, the mass observation diarist whose records of domestic life in this Lancashire shipyard town constitute one of the most detailed archives of working-class food practice in mid-century Britain, documented her meals with the precision of an accountant. Oxtail, the cheapest cut at the butcher's, pre-boiled and kept in a glass jar in the larder, reheated in 4 minutes, with pearl barley added from a second jar. She recorded the cost in shillings and pence per serving, noting that the batch produced 4 full meals, collagen-rich, joint-supportive, warming. The barley thickened the broth without flour. For older bodies, this was a complete meal with no element requiring chewing beyond a soft swallow. The larder held the surplus. The larder made the economy possible. Number 16, fried bread with bacon scraps, Sunderland, 1953. Bacon rationing ended in 1953. The scraps were still too valuable to throw away. In boarding houses along the Sunderland dockside, landladies rendered bacon rind and scraps in an iron frying pan, 1 minute, then fried stale bread in the rendered fat, 2 minutes, until the surface crisped. The scraps crisped alongside, 4 minutes total. The bread, which would otherwise have hardened past usefulness, became a hot, calorie-dense plate. No waste. The fat was the medium, the flavoring, and the nutrition source simultaneously. For older single residents in those boarding houses, this was a meal made entirely from things that were about to be discarded. The boarding houses are gone. The landladies who ran them are gone. The iron pan has been replaced by a non-stick surface that discourages the fat. Number 15. Tinned pilchards on toast. Bristol, 1954. Grocery price lists from Bristol cooperative stores in 1954 show tinned pilchards in tomato sauce as among the cheapest tinned proteins available on any British shelf. The tin opened, the fish laid onto toast. A dash of malt vinegar applied. 3 minutes. Omega-3 fatty acids for cardiovascular and cognitive function. Soft flesh requiring no chewing force, no bones in the tinned form. A single tin constituted a single serving for one person. NHS nutritionists decades later would describe the omega-3 content of oily tinned fish as among the most important dietary components for senior cognitive maintenance. The pilchard tin was doing this work in 1954 for pennies. It is still the cheapest complete protein on any British shelf. Most people living alone have forgotten it exists. Number 14. Milk toast. Edinburgh, 1955. District nurses in Edinburgh's community care records from the mid-1950s noted milk toast, bread torn into warm milk with a small amount of sugar or salt, as a standard recommendation for convalescent and elderly patients with reduced appetite or swallowing difficulty. Half a pint of milk, 2 slices of white bread, 4 minutes. The warmth relaxed the throat. The milk delivered calcium. The bread provided caloric density without requiring mastication. Hospitals had prescribed variations of this meal for over a century before the 1950s. Its logic rooted in the understanding that warm, soft, familiar food was eaten when nothing else was. Then the understanding moved on. The supplements arrived. The sachets arrived. Hospitals forgot why the warm bowl had worked. The nurses who remembered retired. The recommendation disappeared from the guidance leaflets. Number 13. Potato soup, single-serve stovetop. County Antrim, 1956. A Women's Institute record from Northern Ireland describes a single-serve potato soup method built entirely around one technical insight: thin slicing. One potato, sliced paper-thin rather than cubed, cooked through in 4 minutes in stock made from a dissolved cube. A half onion added early. Mashed directly in the pot with the back of a spoon. No blender, no sieve, no second vessel. The thin slicing was the hack. It collapsed a 20-minute recipe into 5 by increasing the surface area of each piece. Nobody teaches this anymore. The instruction has been replaced by soup from a can or a carton, both of which cost multiples more per serving and deliver lower potassium, critical for senior blood pressure management, than a single fresh potato dissolved into hot stock. Number 12. Jam sandwich with measured ratio. Coventry, 1957. A Women's Institute preserve record from the Coventry branch notes a specific household practice: the jam sandwich made not by scraping but by measuring. 1 level teaspoon of homemade strawberry jam per slice, not more. The measurement was not meanness, it was precision. A poverty survey from Coventry Social Services in this period recorded jam sandwiches as a consistent component of the diets of elderly women living alone on national assistance. The controlled sugar intake prevented the spike and crash cycle that uncontrolled jam use created. The familiar sweetness triggered appetite in bodies where appetite had become unreliable. The WI measured the jam. It was not indulgence, it was the management of one small pleasure with the same seriousness applied to every other resource in that kitchen. Number 11. Egg custard, stovetop, no oven. Liverpool, 1958. A domestic science textbook used in Liverpool schools in the late 1950s, its title recorded in the Liverpool Education Board's curriculum logs, included stovetop egg custard as a foundational recipe. 1 egg beaten, half a pint of milk warmed slowly, not boiled, the egg stirred in, and the mixture held over a low heat for 4 minutes, stirring constantly until it thickened. Poured into a cup, set as it cooled. Protein, calcium, digestibility, no oven required. The wooden spoon was the only tool. For patients with swallowing difficulties, for elderly bodies requiring gentle food, for anyone for whom a full meal felt impossible, this was a medicine before it was a dessert. The domestic science class that taught it was gone within 30 years. The knowledge went with the timetable. Now the second twist enters the frame. In the 1970s and 1980s, a roll of cling film arrived on the kitchen counter. A frozen TV dinner sat in a supermarket freezer that had not existed 5 years earlier. Bird's Eye and Findus expanded their British retail presence through this decade, and supermarket chains grew their floor space substantially across the same period. The marketing was clear. Single-portion convenience meals were liberation for people living alone. The reality was different. Higher sodium per serving, lower protein density per penny spent, designed for passive consumption, open, heat, eat, rather than the mild daily agency that making a simple meal from stored ingredients had always provided. The convenience meal replaced the skill, but replacing the skill also replaced the confidence, and the confidence once replaced did not return when the convenience meal proved expensive. Number 10. Bloater paste on rye crisp bread. Great Yarmouth, 1959. East Anglian fishery trade records show bloater paste, smoked herring processed and packed in small jars, as a staple product of the Great Yarmouth fishing industry through the mid-century decades. Rye crisp bread, shelf-stable for months, cheap, requiring no refrigeration. The jar opened, the crisp bread laid on a plate, the paste spread. 60 seconds, high omega-3 content. Both components kept for months in a cool cupboard, which meant a woman living alone could buy both in quantity and use them at will without the anxiety of waste. No refrigerator required. One-handed preparation. The crisp bread never went stale. The paste kept for months. That was the entire architecture of the meal, designed for the logistics of a single-person household managing time and cold storage with precision. Number 9. Dripping toast, cold larder version. Sheffield, 1961. Sheffield Oral History Project recordings from the early 1980s document women who had worked in the city's steel industry households describing cold beef dripping, set white in enamel basins kept in north-facing larders, as a weekly staple still in use through the early 1960s. The dripping scooped cold and spread thick on toast. Salt flakes pressed in, eaten standing. 90 seconds. The larder kept it firm. When the larder was removed from the standard British housing plan, a process that accelerated through the late 1960s and 1970s as new council housing specifications eliminated the cold storage alcove, the enamel basin had nowhere cool to live. The dripping softened in room temperature. The habit became impractical. The larder died. The basin was thrown away. The knowledge followed. Number 8. Marmite soldiers in hot water, London East End, 1963. Marmite's wartime vitamin B campaign records, circulated through the 1940s and continuing into the post-war years, promoted the hot water method, half a teaspoon dissolved in a mug of boiling water, as a daily vitamin B supplement for households that could not afford meat. By 1963, in East End grocers' records, Marmite appeared consistently in the weekly purchases of elderly single women. Toast soldiers dipped into the mug, 2 minutes. B12, critical for senior neurological and cognitive function. Virtually free per serving. The mug, the kettle, the knife, nothing else required. B12 deficiency in elderly people living alone is documented in NHS records as a significant and underdiagnosed condition. The cost of addressing it through Marmite was a few pence a week. The cost of not addressing it was measured in GP visits, fatigue diagnoses, and cognitive decline. The mug is still in the cupboard. Most people have forgotten what it was for. Number 7. cold cooked potato with vinegar and salt. Leeds, 1965. Leeds market stall records from the mid-1960s describe cold boiled potatoes, kept overnight in larders cool enough to function as informal refrigeration, being eaten with malt vinegar and salt as a common quick meal among elderly market workers and their households. 60 seconds. The potato was already cooked. The larder had kept it cold. The vinegar was applied. Nutritional science published decades later established that cooked and cooled potato undergoes a structural change, the starch retrograding into a resistant form with a substantially lower glycemic index than freshly cooked potato. This matters for senior diabetics managing blood sugar. The larder generation had been eating low glycemic cold potato for decades before the science had a name for it. Science later confirmed what the larder already knew. Cold potato is a different food. Number 6, bread and butter pudding, no-bake cold version. Birmingham, 1968. A Women's Institute recipe card from a Birmingham branch, its archive location noted in the Institute's regional records, described the cold set method as standard: stale bread layered with sugar and currants, cold milk poured over, the tin waited overnight on the larder shelf, sliced cold the next morning. 0 day of cooking, 0 fuel cost. The stale bread that would otherwise have been discarded became 2 days of soft, sweet, filling meals. When domestic ovens became standard in British households through the 1960s and 1970s, the cold set method ceased to carry any economic advantage. Baking the pudding became the normal method because the oven was there and fuel was no longer the primary constraint. The cold set method was not recorded as obsolete, it was simply never mentioned again. The oven was never needed. That fact was lost when ovens became standard. Number 5, sardine and onion mash, Plymouth, 1972. Grocery price lists from Plymouth cooperative stores in 1972 show tinned sardines as the least expensive tinned fish available, and instant mash powder, introduced to the British market in the late 1960s, as among the cheapest shelf-stable carbohydrates per calorie. The instant mash made in a mug with boiling water, 2 minutes. The sardines mashed directly into the mug with a fork. Half a raw onion diced fine and stirred through. Complete meal, protein, fat, carbohydrate in one vessel with one utensil, requiring no plate, no draining, no washing of a second container. For seniors with reduced grip strength or limited counter space, the one-vessel meal was not a convenience but a structural solution. It needed no plate. That mattered more than people realized. The tinned sardine is still on the shelf. The mug is in the cupboard. The instant mash powder costs under £1. Number 4, semolina porridge, savoury version, Edinburgh, 1976. Scottish domestic science curriculum documents from the mid-1970s, recorded in the Scottish Education Board's programme specifications, included savoury semolina as a foundational quick meal, semolina stirred into boiling stock, cooked for 3 minutes, finished with a small amount of butter. 4 minutes total. Semolina's fine grain meant it cooked faster than oats. Its iron fortification, added to many commercial semolina products during the post-war years, addressed the anemia risk present in older adults on restricted diets. Smooth texture, no chewing, shelf-stable for months. The savoury version disappeared from school menus and domestic science curricula when the 1988 Education Reform Act replaced domestic science with food technology across most British secondary schools. Nobody noticed the savoury semolina specifically. It disappeared in the general erasure. Nobody noticed until it was gone. Number 3, stewed prunes and bread, Liverpool, 1979. NHS district nurse dietary leaflets circulated in Liverpool in the late 1970s included stewed prunes as a specific recommendation for elderly patients presenting with constipation, documented in NHS records as among the most common causes of preventable hospital admission in the over 65 population. Dried prunes soaked overnight in cold water, reheated in 2 minutes in the soaking water, which became a light syrup. bread torn alongside to mop the liquid. 3 minutes of day of preparation, fibre, iron, natural sugar requiring no addition, soft enough for any swallowing difficulty. The overnight soak required 30 seconds the evening before. District nurses prescribed this. Then the district nurse visits became shorter, then the leaflets were replaced by generic dietary guidance. Then the prescription was forgotten, and the intervention it replaced arrived by ambulance. Here is the third and final twist. In 1988, the Education Reform Act restructured the British secondary school curriculum. Domestic science, the subject through which the skills of quick, cheap, single-serve cooking had been formally transmitted for generations, was replaced by food technology. The shift was not accompanied by any record of what was lost. The larder had already been removed from standard British housing plans a decade earlier. The households that had maintained these meals were aging. Their children had grown up in kitchens stocked with convenience packaging. Their grandchildren would not be taught the difference between a soaked split pea and a dry one, or why thin slicing a potato collapses its cooking time, or what cold beef dripping spread on toast could do to a morning. The knowledge was not archived, it was simply lived, until the generation that carried it was gone. Number 2, oat and golden syrup stirabout, rural Wales, 1983. A Welsh Women's Institute oral history, recorded in the Institute's regional archive from the early 1990s, documents elderly women in rural Welsh communities describing the golden syrup stirabout as a weekly constant. Rolled oats stirred into boiling water for 3 minutes, a spoon of golden syrup laid over the surface without stirring in. Done in 4 minutes. Golden syrup tins sealed last for years on a shelf, rolled oats last for months. Neither required refrigeration, no milk, no gas beyond 3 minutes of boiling. High energy density for bodies where appetite had become unreliable. The familiarity of the sweetness, golden syrup, had been in Welsh kitchen cupboards for generations, meant it was eaten when other foods were not. Golden syrup tins still last years on a shelf. Most people living alone do not know that. Number 1. Bread and warm water with salt. Barnsley, 1947 and 1990. The same woman, the same enamel bowl, the same heel of bread, the same boiling water, the same coarse salt, the same saucer laid over the top to hold the heat. A Ministry of Food pamphlet on minimum sustaining nutrition, its specific title held in the Imperial War Museum's archive, described this meal not as poverty food but as a complete short-term caloric intervention requiring no equipment, no skill, no budget beyond the cost of bread and fuel for the kettle. The same bowl exists now, somewhere, in a house where the larder alcove was filled in during a refurbishment in the early 1990s, where the cool north-facing shelf was plastered over and painted and forgotten. The bowl is on a different shelf now, turned upside down, clean, unused. The shelf is still there behind the plasterboard.